We all know that green siren logo, right? But the story behind Starbucks, well, it's not really about coffee. It's actually about a promise a son made to his father, long before the first coffee bean was ever even roasted.
And that's really the question at the heart of this whole thing. How can a simple cup of coffee fulfill a promise like that? It's a question that takes us from the housing projects of Brooklyn all the way to the amazing espresso bars in Milan. And it's all driven by one son's determination to honor his dad.
Because you see, to really get Starbucks, you have to understand the hardship, the heartbreak that fueled its founder, Howard Schultz. It all started with this one single tragic moment.
This quote from Schultz about his father is just, wow. He didn't see his dad as a failure. He saw him as a good man who got trapped by a system that just didn't have a safety net. His father worked all these different jobs, but he never really found dignity or meaning in any of it.
Okay, so picture this. It's 1961. Howard is just 7 years old. His dad, a truck driver delivering diapers, slips on some ice and breaks his ankle. And just like that, their whole world falls apart. No income, no health insurance, no workers' comp, nothing. Howard actually remembers his parents whispering at the dinner table, trying to figure out who to borrow money from. He even had to lie to bill collectors on the phone, telling them his parents weren't home. Just imagine that. And that was the moment that changed everything. Seeing his father, this proud man, just laid up on the couch in a cast, totally defeated, it planted a seed in young Howard. Right then and there, he made a silent vow to himself. If he was ever in charge, he would build a different kind of company, the kind of company his father never got the chance to work for.
So, fast forward a bunch of years. Schultz is now this successful executive in New York City. He's seemingly a world away from those childhood struggles. But then, a really strange pattern on a sales report catches his eye, and it pulls him toward a destiny he never saw coming.
I mean, by 1981, Schultz had it made. Seriously, he was a VP, making great money, living the good life in a New York City apartment with a company car. So, why on earth would he even think about throwing all of that away for some tiny, unknown company 3,000 miles across the country? His own mother actually begged him not to do it. The reason? Pure curiosity. You see, he was a manager for a kitchenware company, and he noticed that this little retailer out in Seattle was ordering way more of their drip coffee makers than even Macy's was. He just had to know why. So he hopped on a plane to find out. The second he walked into that original Starbucks at Pike Place Market, his whole world shifted. He was just hit by this incredible, rich aroma of dark roast coffee. He later described it as a temple for the worship of coffee. They handed him a cup of Sumatra, and with just one sip, he tasted a depth he never even knew was possible. He knew, right in that moment, that he had found his home. So, after a whole year of convincing the founders, Schultz finally moves to Seattle and joins Starbucks. But his biggest aha moment, the one that would literally define the company's entire future, was still on the horizon. Think about it. The company was amazing at sourcing and roasting the best coffee beans in the world. They were total purists. But Schultz couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was missing from the equation. So what was it? Well, the answer came a year later, in 1983, on a business trip to Italy. As he was walking the streets of Milan, he discovered something truly magical, the Italian espresso bar. It was a completely different world, an experience he had never, ever imagined. He saw that it wasn't just about grabbing a coffee. No, it was a daily ritual. It was like theater. The baristas were treated like artists, and they greeted every customer by name. The whole place was a hub for connection, for conversation, for community.
And then, in this flash of insight, he got it. This was the third place, that comfortable, welcoming spot that isn't home and isn't work. He realized that Starbucks shouldn't just be in the coffee bean business, it should be in the business of human connection, and coffee was just the medium to make that happen.
So, totally fired up, Schultz rushes back to Seattle with his epiphany. He is absolutely convinced this is the future. But the original founders, well, let's just say they didn't see it that way. Not at all. The disagreement was pretty simple, but it was deep. Schultz wanted to sell an experience. He wanted to recreate that romance of the Italian coffee bar. But the founders, they were purists. For them, it was only about the product, whole coffee beans. They were terrified that turning into a cafe, a beverage business, would completely ruin the integrity of their brand. For a whole year, Schultz pleaded his case. Finally, they caved, but just a little.
They gave him this tiny, 300-square-foot corner in a new store to test his idea. It wasn't much, but it was his one and only shot. And the result? It was an absolute sensation. Within just a couple of months, that tiny little corner was serving over 800 customers a day. To put that in perspective, their most successful stores were averaging around 250. The lines were snaking out the door. The people had spoken, loud and clear.
But here's the crazy part. Even with that overwhelming proof, the founder, Jerry Baldwin, just wouldn't budge. He saw the success, sure, but he also saw a totally different kind of business, one he wanted no part of. So he shut the experiment down. Schultz was, as you can imagine, devastated, but he knew in his gut he was right. So he left, started his own coffee bar company called Il Giornale, and eventually, he'd come back and buy Starbucks outright.
And that brings us right back to the heart of it all. When Schultz finally took over, he finally had the chance to build the company he had always envisioned, the one guided by that promise he made to himself as a little boy.
You know, when you look back, this whole journey really taught him 4 huge lessons. First, start with dignity. Put your people first, always. Second, build an experience. Don't just sell a product. Third, listen to your heart, even when everyone else is telling you you're wrong. And finally, dare to dream, to build something that's way bigger than yourself.
And this is exactly how he fulfilled that vow to his father. He created a company that treated its employees, or as they call them, partners, with real dignity. He was one of the very first to offer comprehensive health insurance and stock options, even for part-time workers. He built the exact safety net his own father never had.
So in the end, it was never just about coffee, was it? For Schultz, every single store, every partner, and every cup they served, it was all part of a living tribute to the man whose struggle had given him his purpose. And that really leaves us with one last thought. The story of Starbucks shows us that the greatest companies aren't just built on profit, they're built on a promise. It kind of makes you wonder, right? In your own work, in your own life, what promise are you trying to keep?